Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the very first episode of The Rundown. My name is David Paskin. I'm so excited to be with all of you tonight. The Rundown is a brand new show from the Office Hours community where we're going to take a little more of a philosophical look at technology, how it's impacting us, how it's changing our world. We're going to try and have some deep conversations every Thursday evening, about 3 topics each week. And you can help us decide what topics we should be discussing. You can share your thoughts. You can share your questions. You can do so over in our Discord or just by watching on YouTube. Both places I'll be keeping an eye on and trying to bring as many of those comments in as we possibly can. If you just go to therundown.show, you can find links to all of that. I'm most excited about this evening and this program because of the friends and experts and amazing members of our community that I get to speak to. And I want to introduce 3 of them to you now. One of them is going to look very familiar. The other 2, maybe you'll get to know a little bit better. But first, I want to introduce to you John Idelson. John, how are you, sir?
Doing great. It's a beautiful day in Monterey, and it's great to be on the first show. I'm pretty excited about what we're going to talk about today.
I'm really, really honored to have you here. I think of you a little bit like a mentor to me over the past 4 years as I've watched you and learned from you. And I'm just really appreciative for you and all that you give to this community and for joining us tonight. So thank you.
I'll say yes, Grasshopper, but I really learned more from you, David.
Well, okay, we'll just share it. How's that? We'll share.
Sounds good.
We're both teachers. I'm also really, really excited to introduce, well, not to introduce because you know her already probably, but Tamra, who has become really a wonderful friend of mine, both here in the Office Hours community and over in the Zoom Test Kitchen community. And she also, this is the thing, I learn so much from everyone in this community. Tamra, it's so good to have you here.
I'm so excited to be here. I love talking tech, but also I just love hanging out with you, David.
Oh, I love you too. And my brother from another mother, who I know really from the Ecamm Live community. By the way, I should mention that one of the beautiful things about this production is that we're doing using yet another tool in Office Hours to produce a show. For this show, we're using Ecamm Live, and we'll have to, talk about as we go on offline, how it went, how it worked, what things could be better, what can we move to the cloud, how can we engage more people in running the shows, things like that. But getting back to this gentleman, I met him over in the Ecamm community. He's one of the, I want to call you a community manager, but you're really just the moderator, right? You're a moderator of the Facebook group. He's, of course, an expert in everything Ecamm. He's joined the Zoom Test Kitchen community also. Andy Lehman, it's so good to have you here.
It is so good to be here. Yeah, I'm a moderator over at Ecamm, so that's the official title over there.
Now, Andy also, by the way, is the only person that I know of from this panel who is a bona fide podcaster. He's an expert. Now, am I wrong, John? Are you a podcaster? Do you have a podcast?
I have been on podcasts, but I don't have one of my own.
Okay.
I don't even want to listen to myself talk, so I can't imagine anybody else would want to.
And Tamara, do you have one?
I've been contemplating one, but am still
Really?
firmly on the edge of the ocean looking in.
Well, it's official. You're the only one, Andy, who has, and you have a couple, right?
One.
I do. Yes, I have a couple different podcasts. I have Dudes and Dads podcast and Podcast Answers.
Podcast Answers, nice. So helping people create podcasts.
Correct. Yes.
Awesome.
Note to self, talk to Andy.
Yes, note to self. Exactly. Exactly. So let me just really quickly say hello to some friends that we have here who are watching along with us. We've got Sushi, who says good morning. So I assume that Sushi is perhaps in another part of the world from where I am. Dan, it's good to see you. Good evening. Austin Spring is here. Oh, yes, so professional, Dan. So professional. Tony Mobley. See, this is the guy who inspires me. Tony Mobley, the man who inspires me. Chris Clark, it's really good to see you here also. So we have 3 topics that we're going to discuss for tonight that we're going to start with. Hello, Taylor. It's good to see you here. The first topic, and this is the reason why I was picking on you a little bit, Andy, is I want to talk a little bit about content creation, and specifically this tool that a lot of us have discovered and have been playing around with called Notebook LM. So let me just set the scene for us. All right. So here is Notebook LM. Now, I took this very topic, the future of content creation, and I found an article that I shared with the panel beforehand. But I then took that article, I put it into Notebook LM, and I said, do me a favor and create some things for me. So it, of course, gave me a summary. It gave me some suggested questions. And then it did this. And this is the piece that I really think is worth discussing. So just take a listen.
Okay, so get this. Ever imagine like your company turning a boring old chart into a podcast?
Yeah.
That's what we're diving into today. Buckle up, because the future of content creation is getting seriously wild.
It really is.
We're talking about the implications.
So here's the thing. I've made a couple of these. You know, I've put a couple of sources in, and every time I listen to the output, and it's incredibly compelling. It does a fantastic job of not just ingesting and reformulating the data that I give it, the inputs that I give it, but it's almost like I'm learning from, I put the information in, but it's like I'm learning, it's teaching me. So what I want to get into a little bit today is, what does this mean for people like Andy or people like anyone who is out there creating content? Is it enough that these large language models are able to, with such precision, survey a tremendous amount of information and then give it back to us, not just in summaries, but in full-fledged podcasts? I mean, you'd never know that those 2 voices were not human beings, at least not
Unless you listen to enough of them.
Unless,
then you can tell their little idioms that it uses. But yeah, no, and I really like that they've recently come out with the ability to kind of customize that. So you can say, make this more professional, make this more lively. And so you do have a chance to kind of change up the tone a little bit on how that's going to kind of come out.
Wait, where is that? I missed that part.
I think when you go in there, you can customize it. I've not played with it yet, but I've seen the release on it.
That was a big request. They have a Discord for this, and one of the big requests was being able to make sort of adjustments to it. Yes, you know, whenever you hear, if you're listening to anything and you hear, that's what we're going to take a deep dive into today, you know it's from Notebook LM, because that's sort of their thing. You create content, Andy. So I mean, how does this compare? Is this competition for human creation, for human discussion?
So one of the things that I've loved about it is the ability to go in and say, this is my content. I usually give it a description, or I give it my transcription of my podcast episode. And then I say, give me a title and a episode description. And it does a great job at doing that. I tweak that sometimes. I don't necessarily leave the same exact words, but I do like the fact that it gives it a little bit better. I'm not a wordsmith. I'm not a marketing person by nature. And so I don't always think of all of the great things that are SEO friendly, but I know that those do a better job than I do. And so for me, I love that part of Notebook LM or Chat GPT, but I found especially Notebook LM does a better job because it uses what you've given it, where I think Chat GPT sometimes uses other things and it doesn't necessarily do a great job.
Do we lose some of the authenticity of a human exploration of a topic? I mean, is I guess let me change the way I ask that question. Are these tools able to do that yet? And if they aren't, do we want them to be able to? listening to these has been for me so compelling that part of me, when I put this topic in, part of me said to myself, maybe we don't need to do the rundown. I mean, I could just send the articles out. Folks can throw them into Notebook LM and they don't need me.
I
Well,
think
I
that
think
Notebook
eventually you're going to get sort of tired of the model. In mass media, mass customization. Have any of you been driving on a highway listening to your radio? And the disc jockey, when we have them, if it's not, all automated, will say, here you're driving on the LA, look to your left. Aren't the crazy people out here today? And there's, thousands of people on the freeway, but they look to the left, they go, yeah, the crazy guy's right there. I can tell. So, this is not really that personalized. I think, David, the question I ask you is sort of, was the article that you wrote written by a real human? Now, it'd be real interesting if
Did I feed an AI article?
Wrote the article and the AI article. And I'm a little bit of a computer programmer by trade. And so, garbage in, garbage out. So you probably read compelling articles and it was presented to you in a very pleasing and nice way. And it just enhanced the experience. The more redundancy, or probably the wrong term to do it when I'm doing instructional design, but more impressions, the more times you hear things, the more you learn about it, the more you engage with it. So you read the article and then it got read to you. And I could see that being very compelling. But it'd be interesting for you to take an article that's completely alien to you, maybe even with misinformation, and see what podcast comes out of that and see if it's as compelling.
Yeah.
Now, I did something totally different with it. I, because I've been working with ChatGPT on like looking at my resume and like rebranding, I took all of that information, a huge document that had all the ChatGPT stuff in it, plus like every resume that I've ever had is like in one 30-page document. And I dumped that in. I dumped a YouTube of something I've been on and I kind of let it do its thing. And I had like Myers-Briggs test scores, like everything you could possibly imagine. I just threw it in there and got 10 minutes about me, which I highly recommend you all do. But it does sound very similar, like to what David produced. It sounds exactly the same. So I think that, yes, it brought together, it was interesting the things that it chose to pick to talk about for 10 minutes. And you can really shape that. I do think there's a lot of value in the way that Andy uses it, where you kind of use it to enhance. I think you lose humanity in it. I think that particularly people who do video live streams, you lose that connectivity with your audience and with the community that you've created, because sometimes it's not just about content. Lots of people, content creators, talk about exactly the same thing, and it's their special sauce that makes it interesting and makes you kind of want to go back to their community all the time and go, hey, Andy's talking about this. I'm going to go learn from Andy. So I think that you just can't substitute.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the other things that I've used both Notebook LM and ChatGPT for is kind of giving ideas. So I'll say, what are some podcast topics that people are looking for? And I can get an idea. And then I'm like, oh, that's great. And then I go talk about it from my point of view. So because I'm a podcaster, I've been podcasting since 2007. And so I go out and I actually flesh out the idea with my own bullet points, with my own notes, and then do the podcast on it. So to me, that's where the human interaction comes from. If I were to just ask it for, let's say the topic of how to set up your Rodecaster, it's going to give me 3 points or 6 points or 10 points that I'm just going to read through. There's no human interaction there. Then we can have the automated voice create it, and it's not really a human. It's not really a human podcast. It's me and my intonation that makes a podcast and connectable.
But tools like this can solve the blank page problem.
Absolutely.
Which is
yes.
Right. When you're starting a project, very often I find myself, and Chris in the chat is saying this could be a novelty effect, and he's right. I think the podcast piece of this is definitely sort of novelty. certainly when these tools are more ubiquitous, I think we'll get over it. And like most things, we'll use them when they're helpful and ignore them when they're not. But being able to be given ideas, to be given suggestions, to have something to start with, and then to be able to iterate on that. That, I think, to me is the piece that's really compelling, right? So I using Google LM, I asked it for some questions for a podcast discussion, and it came up with a few. But then I said, you know what, I want to take a philosophical approach. And then it gave me some of those. And then it started citing from the article with answers. I said, well, I don't really want the answers. I really only care about the questions. And I was able to iterate on that until I got some really thoughtful questions that could be the basis or the beginning of a really meaningful discussion. So that blank page problem is something that
I think
the rough draft idea. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's interesting if you explain something to somebody and you think you've communicated what they want to do, and then you show them your first thing, they go, well, I don't want that. So you need to have something to show people as close as your product's going to be. So I think this is where all the AI, whether it be the chat or whether the whatever the one for graphics, they got so many different names, or Claude who's doing charts. I use that to be the, first pass, and could show it to people and they go, no, that's not what I wanted. I said, okay, well, what did you want? And it lets you do that. But I think we are in the novelty stage. I think back to when podcasts started, 2003, and then 2004, when iTunes had podcasts built into it. The question is, is this going to destroy radio? What's radio going to be? And it wasn't what anybody predicted it would be now. And now this is sort of an interesting iteration that now we've automated those podcasts, which people didn't know what it was going to be in 2005. We have no idea what it's going to be in 2025, right. Which is not that far away.
Tamara,
I think as a revision tool, it's super compelling. Yeah. I work with writers on a regular basis, and we've been kind of playing around with it as a revision tool. And what's neat about it is that it really takes away, you're not giving your baby to a human that you care about their opinion. So it takes some of that nerve away from it, and you can really take, I have writers, and I have myself too, when I'm getting stuff back, I don't feel the anxiety of that I've given it to someone that I care about. Even when I was doing like my own branding stuff, I was talking about myself in the third person and used it as an assistant. And it was fascinating because I would get more compelling, and I realized, oh, this is what I do as a producer. I don't come up with the marketing myself. I say, this is what I'm looking for. And someone comes away and they give me, 3 things, and I give it notes. Only this allowed me to do it 1,000,000 times. Like, any human would be so angry at me. They'd be like, that girl can't decide anything.
Can you move it just 2 centimeters to the right, a little more blue?
You can really be granular with it and just go back. Well, what about if I add this color? What does that mean? It spits everything back, and I don't have to annoy a real person.
Tamara,
but it is sort of a fidget tool now. People with Chat GTP was throwing in questions, and then with Midjourney, how many pictures? What I've been playing with this is that I'm the gray beard here, Andy. It will happen.
I've got some.
I don't mind, when the age brackets, go down, but when they stop at 55 and they don't care beyond that at all. So I've been taking items which were clearly designed or written for the whatever XYZ generation. And then I say, how would you explain this to a 75-year-old? I grew up watching public television when Lawrence Welk, nobody will know about it, but Lawrence Welk was the really big thing, and then it disappeared. But on public radio, where the more senior people were, it went on for years. Now I realize that, the Beatles are now on public television for us senior people. And, it's been fun to see how it analyzes the communication patterns of the different generations. And to me, it's sort of a toy. It's like a fidget toy.
It's great at that though, because I work with some writers in preschool, and I've put stuff in and said, how would I talk about XYZ? How would I talk to someone who is in 3 to 5 years old? What would the dialogue look like? And then what would the dialogue look like if it was 7 to 10 years old? And it's fascinating how just the minute little differences that it makes. And it's really good at that. You can really kind of see the differences of what it's doing. And I think in that way, it's really positive. But I do think that there now in the artistic community, whether it be artists or writers, they're very kind of reticent to play around with it. And I've had to like hold seminars and be like, look, it's not as bad as you think, but yes, there's still a copyright issue with it that is not okay, right?
But Tamara, I want to ask you a related question, specifically because you work in theater. So theater, and to a certain extent, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, but podcasting, it's all storytelling. John, I remember you talking about storytelling. I don't remember the context, but it's all storytelling, which is such a uniquely human thing to do. So what are the implications of artificial intelligence and machine learning seeping into these? It's one thing to have them run calculations. It's another thing for them to start telling stories, telling our stories. Tamara? Sorry,
I think, David.
Andy, go ahead, and then Tamara.
I say in our original Discord channel for this episode, you had put in something about some guy, I think in Japan, who had created an LLM of his daughter that was no longer living.
Oh yeah.
And he was talking to her like it was his daughter,
tonight, but yes.
And that was scary. Like that was scary to me because to me it was like, that is not your daughter. Yes, it's saying things that your daughter may have said, but it is not your daughter. And so again, I think this goes back to the whole idea of just in general, the AI. Well, it's helpful and it can give us prompts. I don't think it's going to be a replacement for humans. I don't think that it can replace me as a podcaster. Tamara, you as a producer, I don't think it can do that because it's gonna help us out and it's good as an assistant. I like assistant AI, with A being assistant, just because I think that is more helpful because that's really what it is, not artificial.
Yeah, I think to your point, David, it's less, I think, of a problem in theater than it is in television. So like TV and film, this is the basis for all of the strikes last year and the potential strikes that are now, is really this AI creative component. Because from a network standpoint and from like the higher up standpoint, which are more and more being run by corporations that are not creative entities, they're business investors, then finding the cheapest way to do things, AI looks really, really tempting. It looks really tempting to say, let's do an entire series like this. So that's really what they've been fighting for in our, in our industry, in TV specifically. And I think there's a real potential for that to be a problem. But at the end of the day, I think every new technology that we've had from the printing press forward has had the same conversation, which this is going to replace us. And then what do we do? And the truth is, it will replace some people. Some people are going to lose jobs, and jobs will be phased out that we didn't need to have or that are redundant at this point. And the people who aren't very good at their jobs are not going to have a job but is it going to replace real storytellers? No, because I think storytelling is inherently human. And even though you can have something that sounds human, it doesn't come from that same place. And I think the storytellers who are good at what they do are going to rise to the top. And I think that's not going to change based on AI.
I have a 21-year-old daughter and a 27-year-old daughter, and I had a conversation with them the other day, trying to explain that to them, that whatever field they choose, they need to be one of the best in that field. Because if you're not one of the best, you won't be needed for after a while, because we will figure out how to have artificial intelligence do those jobs. Not every job, of course, but many jobs. So if you're going to pick one of those that can be done by computers, or you imagine may be done by computers, make sure you're one of the best, so that it matters. That
or be flexible.
Or be
and
flexible.
That's the key, right? That's what's not happening as we're seeing generations come into the workforce, is that we don't have a sense of risk taking. We don't have a tolerance for failure. We have a tolerance for likes and appreciation, and really growth comes from failure. It is breeded there. It grows from that place. And so it's not even just about being the best at what you do. It's being able to look at the next thing. I mean, if you look at the people who have shaped the world, Bill Gates looking at something like the Altair, which like lights up, 8 little lights that light up a computer that they put together in their basement, and said everyone should have one of those on their desk.
Right.
Like that kind of visionary thinking comes from the ability to not be stuck at trying to be the best at what you are at this moment. It's being able to iterate into whatever your next best thing is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Dave, I think you're lucky that you have 2 daughters who listen to you.
I didn't say they listened. I just said I told them.
Well, my daughter was the one I talked to you about being, age appropriate communications. My kids would come to the lectures sometimes at campus. We go eat afterwards, and usually the dinner was, okay, Dad, you can't refer to the Spice Girls. Let's figure out who you need to reference. And so she was giving me some pointers on making sure I wouldn't lose my new student audience.
There's no winning with daughters. I've got 4 of them. There's no winning.
You're doing real well. You're speaking in full sentences. That's
close. Hey, so what my greatest fear has come true, and that is that there's no way we're going to get to 3 topics for 20 minutes each, because we're already half an hour in. But I want to make sure that we just say hello quickly to folks who are watching, because I'm so grateful. And especially, I just want to, Chris has given a big old shout out to, but that's too small. You can't see that. I'll make that a little bigger. A nice shout out to our friend John here. He loved listening to John back on Education Hour on Saturdays. The big ideas, but also what he let us see of his family, his challenges, small victories, and disappointments. And then he adds at the end that we need to be the best and tell personal stories. That's very, very true. Brody, it's good to see you. Ryan, it's good to see you. Everyone. And I just want to say that James, before the show over in Mukana, asked that about a little bit about the show and about the graphics and the website building, intro video. Yes, it's all been done before. What have I learned in the first creative steps of building the show? Ask me next week or the week after, because I'm my work, the way my mind works is when I have an idea, the very first thing I do is I build a website, like with all the graphics and everything, just because I'm a visual person. And so all this stuff, the silly stuff, the intro video, like all that, it's just silliness, but it helped me imagine what we could be doing here. So ask me in a couple of weeks. And Lois is here. I'm so happy Lois is here, and she wants to know what topics have been suggested for the show. Well, speaking of that, Lois, the qualities of great design. There is a wonderful, a number of videos were just released on YouTube from WWDC for the developers. And one of those videos was called The Qualities of Great Design. I loved this video. And what I loved about it is, first of all, the presenter did I thought, a fantastic job. She really spoke to the audience while not speaking above the audience. The entire talk was her reflecting on and synthesizing data from interviews that she had done with different developers and designers. But the most interesting piece was when she began asking questions about the quality of great design. So what I'd like to do, and I'm putting you guys on the spot because I didn't tell you this ahead of time, I'd like to just go around and what is one either app or website or tool, something that you feel has really solid design, that really real quality, I shouldn't have said solid, quality design, that's the key word. And what is it about that thing that that gives it that quality? Can I start with you, John? Is that okay?
Sure. No, I'm willing to be in the canon here. I'm going to do one that's an educational one, and my good friend Oliver from Bronx TV, and it was stop motion. It won one of the design awards from Apple, and it was a clay animation stop motion app. So the interest in the design of this is it was something that was so well designed that a classroom teacher could simply give the tool to the students and they could figure it out and start creating animations. So I think, I mean, there's aesthetic views of design, great buildings. I spent the weekend in Kentucky. The horse farms were just gorgeous, the buildings that they did. So there's a design elements and architecture. But for me, good design, because that was the field I was in, basically instructional design, teaching people how to create resources and materials to help people learn and accomplish the tasks that they want to do. So a program like that was very easy to be used across multiple grade levels without a lot of teacher intervention, and let the students create beautiful programs and events. So that was my one of the favorite design. And I came across it very early on. Disclaimer, I'm an Apple fanboy. I was an Apple Distinguished Educator, their term. I don't consider myself distinguished, but that's how they named us. And it was at that event where we got introduced to this program. And it was, aimed for middle school, elementary school. And here we were all academics, whether it be K-12 or higher ed. And we were probably playing with it just as enthusiastically as the elementary school and middle school students who were going to be getting to use it.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you. Andy, can I pick on you?
Sure. I'm as John was talking, I'm trying to think, okay, what website, what app do I really enjoy that has great design? And I, I was just going through a bunch of them in my head, trying to think, okay, David's picking on me. I've got to figure out something. So, I have not had a good chance to think about it a lot, but I really like the website from geocaching.com. So I have been a big geocacher in the past and love doing that. But I like the site just because it's fairly clean and it kind of aesthetically kind of has the feel of what you're doing. So the geocaching, for you don't know, is GPS coordinates. You hide and find things. And so to me, the color scheme of the geocaching website is green. It reminds me of being outside. It's clean. It's simple. It has some map type elements to it. So it's kind of gives me a sense of what the product or service is about.
Amazing. Tamra, do you have something?
I'm going to go mainstream with a program you and I both like. There's a very specific element that I love about Canva that I'm going to mention, because I think that what Canva does design wise, I think it can be kind of messy and kind of crazy, but one thing that it has evolved to is there are 2 or 3 ways to get into every single thing that you can do on Canva. And I think that entry point of having multiple ways of doing the same thing is super important in a website design and in design in general, because that broadens your audience. So for example, you can click on a sidebar, you can, move, you can use your little magic tools to just use your keyboard. There's lots of different ways to do the exact same thing. And I think that as it's evolved, it's become even more design friendly, even though yes, it's a design application, but it's not meant for people who are using Photoshop. It's actually tends to be even easier than Photoshop. I use both, and I run to Canva if I've got to do something quickly. I don't run to Photoshop for quick things. But one of the reasons that it's so user friendly is that there are so many access points to do every single thing, and that's what they keep iterating and making stronger. And I think having a website that is usable in so many different ways really speaks to whichever side of the brain you use in order to do whatever you need to do on a site.
So for me, I think I would pick the Arc browser. For those of you who don't know, this is a relatively new to the scene browser that pretty much no one's using, I think. But I like it. I think what I like about it is I'm big on symmetry. I'm big on corners, sort of all the radius curves being the same, things like that. UI and UX, user interface, is everything to me. I will choose apps that we'll use, for example, in our school or in our temple or in our communities, based primarily on the user interface and how folks will be able to interact with it. And the Arc browser is just a nice, clean experience. And I think, to your point, Tamara, I mean, there are multiple ways to get to the information I need. I can have things pinned up here. I can have things pinned down here in folders. It's a different experience, which I think also I have always thought of myself as I'm a futurist. I'm much more interested in what's coming than what is. And so since every other browser has all the the stuff up at the top, I like the idea of a browser with everything down the left side. This is something that I think it's a really nice, different, clean design. So what is it about these different things, or what is it about? I mean, Andy, let me pick on you again. You're a creator. You're making podcasts. What goes into? Where is the quality there? What do you strive for, so that when you're done and you're listening back, you can say, you know what, that's quality.
Yeah, so for me, it's definitely going to be audio quality, and by that I mean I don't hear a whole lot of room echo. I am not hearing extra noises. The kids talking downstairs, the dogs barking, me hitting the table. I'm not hearing those things. It's very clear, very even level, like just kind of a clean, polished product. So essentially the same thing that you said with designing clean UI UX. For me, audio is the same way. It's going to be something, uniform, level, clean, essentially like a good production.
And by the way, speaking of audio, I should say that, so this is the first thing I've ever done from my home, not from my office, which means I don't have all my gear here. And so I forgot to set up my meters. So we did not have a chance to check meters beforehand. So if we're a little out of whack, that's on me. I apologize for that.
Well, I like your new setting. I thought maybe you did a new studio just for this show.
No, this is my eldest daughter moved out, and so I earned a new home office studio. So
that is the advantage. When we moved to our new house and the kids were helping us, they were both off to school, and they saw the boxes moving in. They said, none of the boxes say Sarah's room or Brendan's room. I said, yeah.
Yeah,
because they aren't your rooms.
Have
to change the locks on the door to keep them out. We managed.
Because now it's ours, right? We're going to come back to this, but I just want to, Leo Mindell, who I don't know why he's awake, go to bed. It's like 3 a.m. where he is. He's in London. Leo, what are you doing? He says to me, AI is just a tool to visualize thoughts faster. He's going back to the earlier discussion, but I wanted to make sure to honor him and bring him in. The same way the pony delivered letters, then fax, then email, AI still needs a human to think the thought. It can't replace that. AI visualizes thoughts. We think the thoughts, and then AI helps us visualize them. That's a really beautiful way of thinking about it. Tamara, quality in production. How do you define quality in production?
Well, I think for me, and this is where, as a producer, this is what I have to do, is my main concern. I have to think about the audience's experience from the second they buy a ticket till the second they leave. And it's similar to whether if you're doing television or not. I, as a producer, have to think about those things. And so everything for me has to play into the people that we serve. And I think that's true. What you were speaking of too, Andy, is like you want it to sound good, but you want it to sound good so that your listener can hear and not be thinking about anything else but the topic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where kind of the trickiness gets into play, right? Because artists are going to think about what they do best. And then, a producer's job is to kind of grab all of those things in service to the community. You don't need to be in service like for a writer, they have to be in service to their story. They've got to tell the story that's their story to tell, that they're the only person who can tell that story the best that they can tell it. And my job is to sit down and go, yes, but this line needs to be rewritten so an actor can remember it, so that an audience can hear it. And it's most important that that happens. So I think quality has to do with, if you're producing art for someone, if you're producing art for yourself, then your quality control is going to be very different. But if you are producing mainstream media or any kind of media that involves an audience, then quality has to be in service of providing for your community and making your community be able to access your material. And that's going to happen with, if it's, audio, having good video, having, for me as a storyteller, it starts and ends with story. I mean, even if you look at the popularity of TikTok is literally people putting on a microphone and telling their stories, and they're incredibly compelling. And that is why it's not the length. People are like, oh, people want short form content. People will watch 20 and 30 episodes or parts to someone's story. So at the end of the day, it has to be a compelling story, but if you're involving an audience, you have a service to provide to make sure that they can hear that story, they can see that story, that it's told in the best way, that it's cast in the best way, but it has to be in service to who you're providing this for.
Ray Harwood over in Mukana put a link to Jay Akunzo and what he teaches, which is don't market more, matter more. And the way that Ray said that is don't be the best, be their favorite, which is a really beautiful way of thinking about this. It connects us back to the AI conversation, but it also makes me think of a key point that came out in this video from WWDC, and that was the correlation or the connection between quality and care. If we do what we do with care, if we show our audience, our students, our customers, our whoever's, that we genuinely care, that's when quality, I think, shines through. That we can sell, but at the end of the day, when we create tools and content and whatever it is that we create that matters and that shows that, and that is an expression of our caring, I think that is quite profound when it comes to quality.
I think ultimately that's why people are successful at what they do, right? You could tell the people who are creating a community. And that's really what the best of the internet is. The very, very best that the internet has. It has a lot of stuff that over the course of the years have been proven to be good and have proven to be bad. But at its core, community and its ability to bring people together. And, like we wouldn't have known each other if this wasn't, if we didn't have this community. Right. That's the best it has to offer. And the people who are able to cultivate that community and serve who they have cultivated will, it's fun watching. Even if you're not part of that community, if you happen on someone's YouTube where you see that they have a community in their streams, you're like, I want to know these people. I want to hang out with them. Sure, I want to join their Discord, because that's the best that the internet has to offer.
Yeah. I'm not here to plug Ecamm, but I'll just say that one of the things that I love most about Ecamm, and that I think makes Ecamm a real quality product, is the community, is the nature of anybody at any hour of the day can post a question or a challenge on Facebook, and Andy within nanoseconds responds to it. And Andy isn't the only one. There are a ton of people. That community aspect is really, really powerful. And in fact, it's funny you mentioned that, because Brandon he's watching us on YouTube, and he just said that he's amazed at the talented communal nature of our community, of this group. and our ability to support content like this. So that's true. It really.
I mean, office hours is the same way, right? Like all of
this community of office
that's
hours.
literally how we have all come together has been, and even in like I started a writing community that meets. We do a 14-hour writing retreat every first second Saturday of every single month since 2020, and that community of people, some of them I've never met. They're around the world. They've popped in, and there's something really powerful about that. And I think that's really the strength. And at the end of the day, that's one of the things that's kind of missing right now, where they're wondering why streaming's not quite working, whereas broadcast television used to work. It's because everybody was watching the same television show, and then they would go home and go back to work the next day and talk about it. Everybody was there for Who Shot JR.
We've lost community around television.
We've lost community, and we've lost like a sense of of watching simultaneously, right? When I was doing TV, when I was at NBC and Fox in the late 2000s, early 2000s, we knew where everybody was on a Thursday night. From Friends through ER, we knew where most of the people were. Like, just we were all there at the same time. And that doesn't happen now because we're watching in an asynchronous way. And we're kind of like, wow, what's happening? How come people don't have an attention span anymore? People have an attention span. They want story, and they want it to be predictable. They don't want to wait 3 seasons to see a show. They want to be involved in it. And so like that part has always been all the way back through entertainment, when you had storytellers in the square who would come and tell stories to the town square. They'd tell fairy tales, and everybody would come watch them. Same thing with like looking at Shakespeare and going all the way through. You see that community, and that's where this creator economy is coming from, because people are in community with each other, and they're creating and for each other, and they're serving a very specific niche of people. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing a shift in what people are watching and how intentional they are in what they're spending their time doing.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull the academic part here. Communities have been around for such a long time. You think of the original guilds, which were communities of practice. Back in the 2000s, when you were talking about, we know who was going to be watching television to see what Archie Bunker did or whatever. There was a lot of work in the field I am in higher education talking about communities of practice. And in the old days, before the internet, the libraries, research libraries of universities became known for what they might have. The Steinbeck Library at Stanford and at San Jose, you could name certain libraries that were known for certain subjects or book matter. And then the academics studying those would go there, and that became that community of practice. It's just harder to establish an asynchronous community. And I think that's the interesting thing. And even when office hours, although things are happening all the time, there is a fixed time. Unfortunately, somewhat US centric, just because it's the time it starts on the East Coast. But communities of practices are critical for people to be able to transfer knowledge, to learn new knowledge, and to succeed.
Well, I think that's interesting too, because I think I'm a big podcast fanatic. I love that. I love the time shifted nature of that. But at the same time, I also love live streams and watching with people. I love seeing comments on screen. It makes the show like that. I even, when I'm recording my podcasts, I do a live stream of the show because of that, because it allows the listeners of the show that I'm producing to have input and be part of the show and part of that community. And I've noticed that, David, going back to what you said about Ecamm, like part of the reason our community is so great at Ecamm is because they have all of these live shows that people are a part of, and then they get on and then they go back to the Facebook and are chatting and asking questions, and people are so helpful there. But then, tomorrow we'll see them on the live stream chatting, and we've kind of built this community. I've never met any of them in person. David, that's how I know you, is through Ecamm, but I've never met you in person. But I do feel like there's connection there because of that.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I want to shift us a little, because this conversation about connection and community is that the quality of a thing comes from the people that are that make it and that participate in it. I want to shift us to one last topic for tonight. We've only got about 10 minutes left, and it's not going to be nearly enough time for this, but I want to talk for a moment about the power of one. And I don't want this to be a conversation about a particular person, although as soon as I say his name, it's going to be hard. Elon Musk has a tremendous amount of power because of what he has been contributing technologically to our world. Starlink and providing Starlink to war-torn countries and disaster-ridden areas. SpaceX. I was just talking with my family the other day. We can't even bring our astronauts back from the International Space Station. We have to outsource it to Elon Musk. Because of what he has been able to do, and of course it isn't just him, it's the team of SpaceX, it's the team at Starlink, but he has garnered a tremendous amount of power. And so what I'm wondering from you is, at what point is Google too big? At what point is Elon Musk too big? At what point is a social network too big? At what point do we need to insist that the tools that we use are created by a community, not just one person or one entity? Are we treading in? Is it dangerous? I guess is what I'm really asking. Are we treading in dangerous
I'm going to
waters?
sort of derail you a little bit, but I think it's going to come circling around. How many of you have heard of Hanya Home?
Hanya Home?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
She was a ballerina in Germany, and at 40, she left Germany, came to the US. Things were happening in Germany that weren't great. And she reinvented herself. She's commonly known for bringing dance to the theater. She did the choreography for My Fair Lady, Kiss Me, Kate. She was a contemporary of Martha Graham. And in the days of Martha Graham, that was a style of modern dance. But there's a documentary on Hanya, and I'm into dance, but trust me, we'll get to something with this. But with Graham, all the dancers looked exactly alike. That was the whole idea. And they even called them Graham crackers. And her strength was the creativity that she could do with a mass of human bodies conforming to her will in the dance. Hanya did a whole different approach. One woman, age 40, came over, reinvented what the musical was by adding dance to the conversation. She also was known for not a style like Martha Graham, but the ability to take the individual strengths that a dancer had and then have them explode with the creativity that she helped nurture. She changed theater. She changed the lives of people. So I think the power of one, we could all probably go through our list of the powers of one person who really made that incredible difference, whether it's the Nobel Prize winners. I think the challenge about talking about Musk at this point in time, in this day, this week, is we're too close to it. There is a power struggle here of who controls technology, and that's not going to go away. And I don't think that's Musk's problem, but it is going to be something society is going to have to deal with.
But you just put your finger on my concern, and Chris actually mentioned something again about the last topic, but it fits here. He talks about vulnerability. A key element of sustainable and vital communities is vulnerability. When you have this much power, you can't. There's no humility. There's no vulnerableness. A sense of vulnerableness. It's almost as if you're untouchable. And so how do we how do we protect ourselves from that without stifling the unbelievable contributions that the Steve Jobs and the Elon Musks have and the ballerinas have contributed to our world?
So I think that on the surface, it looks like, well, if you have all the money, you get to play. And I actually think the privilege that an Elon Musk has and that a Steve Jobs had is the privilege of failure. Because failure is where you grow and thrive and where you take risks. And if you look at the enormous risks that Elon Musk has taken and the failures he's had along the way, that's where that power comes from. And then one of the ways we have to, and it's the same with Martha Graham and with your
Anya Home.
Yeah, with your choreography analysis, because if you're not able to fail, if we're not growing a culture where people are willing to try something and be bad at it, then that is not, we're not going to be growing. The company that my producing partner and I, for theater, we tell all the young people coming in, we're like, your job here is to fail, and your job is to fail super big, and we're going to fail in front of you. And this is a place where you come to fail. And I've had people fail in magnificent ways, but you can't celebrate growth and you can't see growth happen if we are so afraid to fail and so afraid to try something new and so afraid to learn. And that's where things have shifted. And that's where the people who we see at the top, we pretend like they just got there by accident. But if you go back to 1995, you go back to the Wayback Machine and you look at Amazon when it was one of 10,000 pages, it was a gray page like everything else, and it did nothing. You put your email in and it sent you a newsletter of sales in your area. But they had something really interesting. They had this service called Eyes. And what you would do is you'd email their team and you say, hey, I heard about this book. And someone on their staff would read the book and write a little bit of a review. And that got turned into the basis of what Amazon really is, right? Whether you shop there or not, you can go there and see what real people think about a product. It literally changed shopping, not just shopping through the internet, but it changed it from being a salesperson who's going to sell you something to a community of people who are going to tell you if you should like something or not like something. And so that kind of nothingness that starts out as kind of an idea, they sold nothing. They didn't do anything that we think of them today. And we look at them now and they're like, oh, they have so much power. There's so much, they run everything, and they do. But it didn't start out that way. And that's where I think it's so easy now to look at these big corporations and go, oh, but they're like taking over the world and capitalism's terrible. But they took risks, and we are getting further and further away from the point where we as humans are willing to do anything wrong. And that's something that I think if we start shifting that narrative where we don't need as many likes, we are willing to just try something, whether we're good or not, and try something else and learn. And that's something that I think we've gotten away from. That is really the point of people who change the world are people who are willing to be wrong.
Andy, I want to let you jump in if you want to, but I just want to share that John, who's watching on YouTube, says that when the cost of distribution approaches zero, network effects incentivize natural monopolies. And current legislation is ill-suited to regulate monopolies based on controlling demand versus supply. Any thoughts, Andy, that you want to throw in?
Well, and the Amazon one is very interesting because it is amazing what he did and the power it has. But recently I was traveling, not in the major cities, but in rural Kentucky, in New Hampshire, and we forgot something we needed to go buy. And there were no stores that we could go to.
Yep.
So the only way we could get what we needed was to order it overnight through Amazon.
Yeah.
Yet there were a lot of empty storefronts. There were a lot of people who clearly had been working in those stores that now were either papered over or becoming a community center. They were being repurposed. But I think probably beyond today, we have a good topic for next year because absolute power corrupts absolutely. So at what point is something too powerful that we have to figure out how to deal with it?
Yeah. Andy, I want to give you the last word if you'd like it.
Yeah, so I think this is just a very interesting topic because I think, what John said, the power of one is so awesome that what one person can do, given the right, like what they're doing in for good, right? If you're doing things for good, but then we think of things like what Elon is doing, and he's doing good too, but also then you end up with that, like, okay, I can sneak and I can have power that I probably shouldn't have. And so on both ends, the power of one is a very interesting topic, and it's got me thinking. So yeah, something I'll be thinking about all week.
Me too.
I think you're on mute, David.
I knew that. See, this is the problem. It's office hours. It's your fault because I have too many buttons now. And so I pressed one and I forget which one I pressed. I was saying I'm so grateful to each and every one of you for spending some time with me tonight. And I'm going to ask you in a moment. So fair warning, where people can find you, if people want to connect with you, learn more from you, if you want to give them a website or a podcast or whatever, I'll come back to that in just 1 second. But for those of you who are not sitting with me here in Zoom and Ecamm for Zoom, I want to make sure that you know that we're going to try and be here every Thursday night and really want you to be a part of this journey with us. I want you to help us decide what are the different topics and conversations and questions that we should be wrestling with. So if you head over to therundown.show, you'll find up at the top there links to our Discord, links to our YouTube page. We're streaming both on a dedicated YouTube page and on the Office Hours YouTube. But in the Discord there, you can connect with me. You can also put in topics, articles, anything that you think would be interesting. And then down here, yes, I have to fix that on the website. The 9 p.m. is getting cut off. But there's also a link to the Mukana. If you want to share comments outside of the YouTube verse, you can always do that over in Mukana as well. So who should I pick on first? I'm going to pick on Andy first. Is that okay, Andy? Where can people find you? What do you have going on in your life?
So I do podcast consulting, production consulting, both video and podcasting. So podcastanswers.com is where you can find me.
There you go. Tamra, where can people find you? What's happening?
My website is currently under construction because ChatGPT and I are still working that out. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I also produce theater with Right Act Repertory in Los Angeles and in New York off Broadway.
And Mr. Idelson, where can people find you? What's going on with you?
I'm failing retirement, but I'm still affiliated with the university. So I'm just John, John, at CSUMB, which stands for California State University, Monterey Bay. So it's John at csumb.edu. But if you want to see some really cool stuff more than looking at me, look at ports.parks.california.ca.gov. It's Parks online resources for students and teachers. And I'm spending a lot of my time helping get the word out about the state parks through both technology, through electronic field trips, to webcasts, to actually interactions where students will come from a school and they'll be like explorers podcasting or broadcasting back to their school. So ports at parks.california.ca.gov.
That's a long one. I love it.
That's a mouthful.
Hey, I want to throw this in here because it's such a great comment. Grant wrote, by the way, so thankful to Grant for putting on my new favorite show on Monday nights, Extra Hours. But he just says that in response to Tamara, what you said, that the Amazon reviews have been so powerful in the past, but now do we think that there's more skepticism about them because maybe they're being AI generated? So again, connecting a couple of these different comments. Yeah, we won't answer that one today, but we can definitely touch on that. If any of you would like to join us on the panel, hit me up over in Discord. We'd love to have you. I'm so grateful to everyone. We'll see you next week, and we'll see you in office hours, after hours, extra hour, all the hours. We'll see you in all the hours. Bye, everyone.